We have no apologies for absence. And we do have other agencies and departments of government that are watching the proceedings through PBCJ. And that would be the Legal Reform Department, the CPC, Chief Parliamentary Council, the AGC's department, and I'm sure that they will be happy to know that I will be proposing that after this meeting, which I wanted to do in person as a first meeting, that a recommendation for your consideration that we go virtual from here forward in relation to the public notices, etc. So, without further ado, I'm just going to give some brief.
Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to acknowledge apology for lateness from Member Paulwell. He'll be here shortly.
Thank you very much, Member. That's noted. So, I will give some brief opening remarks, and then we'll go straight into the procedural matters, which I actually did yesterday in relation to the Joint Select Committee for the Cyber Crimes Act. So I think I had a good dry run yesterday, so we shouldn't be long. So, members, on August 18, 2015, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, Governor General of Jamaica, gave consent for an act to repeal the Electric Lighting Act, the Electricity Frequency Conversion Act, and the Electricity Development Act, to consolidate and modernize the laws relating to the generation, transmission, distribution, supply, dispatch, and use of electricity, and for connected matters. Part 2 of the Electricity Act 2015, inter alia, outlines the roles and responsibilities of the Minister, the Office of Utilities Regulation, the Generation Procurement Entity, and the Government Electrical Regulator. It also describes the standards of the single buyer. Up until the promulgation of the Electricity Act, the primary legislation for the electricity sector was the Electric Lighting Act 1890. And for those 125 years, the electricity sector was governed mainly by the principles so established. Wow. As the Jamaica society and economy developed and became more diversified, the Electric Lighting Act was not able to adequately provide for the inclusion of new technologies and more modern relationships between the National Electric Grid Operator, the Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, and its customers. In addition, the first oil shock of 1972 resulted in the beginning of the upward pressure on the price of electricity, as almost all fuel for electricity production was imported. This was exacerbated by volatility in such prices due to the geopolitics and other external factors. The cost to operate the power system skyrocketed, and the replacement of the electricity assets became burdensome for the government, who was then the monopoly electricity power supply system operator. Throughout the 1990s, the government sought ways to cauterize the problem and eventually sold 80% of its shareholdings in JPS to the private sector, with a stated intention to introduce competition in the electricity business, commencing with the generation subsector. The new license, the All Island Electricity License 2001, under privatized control, allowed for new generation capacity to be procured through competitive tender process, as of 2004. Notwithstanding, by allowing the JPS to continue to manage the electricity planning, procurement, and implementation up to and beyond the 2004, created obvious challenges where prospective investors were not keen to engage in a procurement process where the JPS, as managers of the process was also a competitor. In 2011, the All Island Electricity License was modified inter alia to allow the OUR the role to plan the electricity sector, procure new generation capacity, and manage the implementation of such projects. This was in addition to their role as regulator. Investors were happier with this new arrangement, but the broader stakeholder group cited an overburdened OUR and possible conflicts of interest. The Electricity Act effectively realigned and clarified the roles of the key stakeholders as follows. The Minister shall plan the system and issue licenses for various activities. Generation procurement entity shall procure new generation capacity. Government electrical regulator shall regulate electricians and electrical inspectors, and the Office of the Utilities Regulation shall regulate the electricity sector generally. It is within the framework of the Vision 2030, National Development Plan, and the National Energy Policy 2009 to 2030 that the Electricity Act 2015 sought to accelerate the electricity sector transformation with the following objectives. Provide for a modern system of regulation for the generation, transmission, distribution, supply, dispatch, and use of electricity. Promote transparency, the identification and allocation of cost and revenues within and between participants in the electricity sector. Promote clarity in relation to the respective roles and responsibilities of the stakeholders in the electricity sector. Facilitate the achievements of the efficient, effective, sustainable, and orderly development of the electricity supply infrastructure, supported by adequate levels of investment. Promote energy efficiency and the use of renewables and other energy sources. Prescribe the required standard in the electricity sector. Ensure the protection and safety of consumers of electricity and the public, and ensure the regulation of the electricity sector is transparent and predictable. This committee has the important task to consider the progress made and advise on how to improve the legislative framework for the electricity sector. It is to be noted that the National Energy Policy 2009 to 30 is currently being revised in order to extend the perspective to 2050, and already Jamaica's first integrated resource plan covers a period through 2037. We will hear from and consider representations made by all the various energy sector stakeholders, not limited to the OUR, JPS, the Independent Power Providers, Consumer Affairs Commission, and the various umbrella groups representing renewables, manufacturers, exporters, private sector organizations, hoteliers, micro, small and medium enterprises, NGOs, and of course civil society. We will encourage the widest consultation because electricity has been and remains the lifeblood of the economy. As members are aware, the purpose of today's meeting is to agree on the committee's modus operandi. In this regard, we will seek to establish a quorum, determine the dates and times of meetings, determine how to proceed in our review of the Act, whether to invite submissions from the public or write to specific entities inviting them to make submissions, or both. And of course, determine an appropriate deadline for the public or specially invited entities to submit their written submissions. Additionally, it is proposed that at our next meeting, the date of which we will determine that a presentation be received from the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology providing an overview of the current Electricity Act. So I take the opportunity to thank the members for agreeing to serve on the committee, and of course, look forward to vibrant engagement of both the government and opposition members as we try to deal with this critical piece of legislation which concerns all Jamaicans. So let me just indicate that we have here from the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, Mr. Fitzroy Vidal, Dr. Zara Oliphant, and Ms. Shanicia Polak, all here from the ministry to give support to the committee. So we can move directly into the discussions on the procedural matters. And just for good order, I'll just again indicate the committee members. The Honorable Diary Vaz, Chairman, Honorable Robert Nestor Morgan, Honorable Xavier Main, Honorable Floyd Green, Ms. Tova Hamilton, Mr. Robert Miller, Mr. Philip Paulwell, Mr. Fitz Jackson, Mr. George Hilton, Senator the Honorable Auburn Hill, Senator the Honorable Leslie Campbell, Senator Shireen Golding Campbell, Senator Damian Crawford, and Senator Janice Allen. I would propose for your consideration, members, that we go with a quorum of 4, 3 plus the chairman, which is what I did yesterday, and that will allow us to be able to start on time and maximize the use of the limited time that is afforded to us. So I put that for your consideration. Those in favor? Okay. In relation to the way forward as it relates to the public notices, as I indicated before, I would like to put to the committee that after this meeting we go virtual, so that we will be able, obviously, to set times that can allow us to move this review in a timely manner. We would obviously send out a public notice. I think we may not be able to meet this weekend. I'm not sure. Yesterday we were. We will try for this weekend in the sense of time. And of course, we, as was indicated in my opening remarks, there is a number of persons or entities that we could write to inviting their participation and comments. So I would like to know whether or not, outside of what I mentioned in my opening remarks, which was the OUR, JPS, the Independent Power Providers, Consumer Affairs Commission, various umbrella groups representing renewables, manufacturers, exporters, private sector organizations, hoteliers, micro, medium, and small enterprises, and of course NGOs and civil society. If there's any specific entities or groups that any of the members have in mind and who will obviously add their perspective to this review. Do we have an actual list of a detailed list? Mr. Vidal, do we have a detailed list? These are, when you say umbrella groups representing renewables, manufacturers, exporters, private sector organizations, we'd have to be more definitive in relation to the actual.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman, members. Right, so there's a more detailed list, the Manufacturers Association, the Employers Association. We can provide that.
Okay, so we need to get that list circulated both to the Parliament here and, of course, to the members just so that they could give an input. But obviously, the public notice, we hope, would capture the attention of those persons interested, but it still would be good to write, especially to some of the major players and organizations. So for the public notice members, we had indicated 3 weeks yesterday in our previous committee meeting, which would have been April 21st, the week of April 21st. Which is when we would meet again virtually, and at that time we would have a presentation from the ministry, and then of course we would be in a position to start setting hearings for those who have responded.
Mr. Chair, for clarity, sir, the placement of the advert, is it that you're giving 3 weeks for persons to reply, or you're going to run it 3 consecutive weeks?
I'm being advised, remember, that we usually run the ad once and give 3 weeks for a response, but it is obviously up to the committee to decide whether or not, with something as critical as this and important as this, we run it once or we run it once per week for the 3 weeks. I mean, I'm open to suggestions.
Mr. Chairman, I think that given where we are, we have to use social media as well, not just the existing legacy media, because we need to hear from a lot of younger people, because they're going to, whatever legislation we put in place, they're the ones that are going to have to live with it for the longest. So, and they operate from social media. So I strongly suggest that we use social media in its various forms to make the notice as well. And maybe you should run it another time. This is big stuff.
Point well taken, member. And since I'm one of those that you're referring to, I would agree wholeheartedly. And we can do that as we have the ways and means through the government apparatus, including my ministry. So we will take that on board. And I will take that on board also for the Cybercrime Act, which also is that constituency of the younger generation. So definitely yes, for sure, 100%.
Chairman, the proposed schedule to come back in April and to have the presentation from the ministry team, I wonder if we could not do that a little earlier during the period of the 3 weeks, so that once they're complete, we have submissions that we can begin to look at in the interest of efficiency.
Point well taken. We can definitely facilitate that. So what the member is asking for is that we would have the presentation by the ministry prior to the 3 week public notice, so that at the end of 3 weeks we would be in a position to go straight into. They still need
because it's the same answer and it's the same.
Right. So as of right now, what's the date you're proposing for the 3 week? So we were proposing, based on the calendar, the Parliament calendar, for the 28th of April at 10 a.m., which would be the next.
You have a meeting on the 21st for cybercrime.
Right. So I have a cybercrime committee meeting virtual on the 21st, at 10 o'clock. So it would be either the 10 o'clock on the 28th, or there may be a slot for a 3 o'clock. Is that so?
On the 21st?
Yeah. There's a slot for a 3 o'clock on the 21st. 2 o'clock, sorry. So I put it to the... I put it to the members in relation to those dates, because we could actually have the presentation by the ministry at 2 o'clock on the 21st, and then the 28th would be the deadline for the public notice responses, and we could actually schedule from the 28th for that. The other thing I'd like to put to the members is in relation to the public responses, the issue of timelines. As you know, some of these presentations can be extremely long. And of course, you don't want to be perceived as trying to think, but obviously we'd have to manage it. I see Member Paul Weldy, I think he has quite a bit of experience in this regard. So I would seek your input on that in relation to how to handle that. If not, you could go on.
Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, let me apologize profusely for being late. I hate being late, but I always try to assume what my chairman is doing. So you have taught me a good lesson today. You are on time, and that's a good way to start. So we anticipate that this will be the norm. So we'll be here on time. I also wanted to commend you. I have to be careful how I commend politicians. But I want to commend you because this matter, which was pointed out by me, I think the first time you made a presentation in Parliament was addressed with such dispatch and expedition. And I believe that is the way to go. It's a matter that has been outstanding, and I want to commend you. And I should also commend you on the fact that you have allowed your staff to be free in enabling information sharing. And you do have a professional staff that I left in place. I'm sorry, I'm joking. That I want to commend you for allowing that type of access, because that is how we are going to be able to continue in this unified approach and to take the energy sector out of the usual political hurly-burly. So I want to thank you for that. You mentioned two things. The ministry is going to be back here on the 21st, and if I could just anticipate that presentation and just wish in that presentation a couple of matters to be addressed, and also in terms of the submissions that you are going to be requesting. I think it would be reasonable if you limit presentations to 10, 15 minutes, and then questions can be asked for 5 or so minutes. But in the sector, you're going to find a lot of people with large treaties on aspects of the energy sector that I think we just have to contain their enthusiasm. In relation to the 21st, and as the team from the ministry is here, I just want us to go back to one of the major objectives of the 2015 law. It was to try to see how we could introduce competition in a sector that had known no competition before. And there was this issue as to whether or not you can have competition where a sector has to be organized as a pure monopoly. And when we looked at it, there were a number of elements to this competition. The net bidding was one element, wheeling was another element, and then there was the JPSCO license that allowed for modifications and for us to expand over time this element of competition, basically an interconnection policy being rolled out. So perhaps in that meeting, if the ministry could come prepared to trace where we are with that major objective. And of course, by now, I'm sure you might have other considerations in terms of objectives of this law. One area one group that I didn't see you have there, Minister, is the Fair Trading Commission. The FTC is very important in all aspects of competition, and there are issues that will emanate out of this review relating directly to competition. And I would love for us to hear a submission from them. And Mr. Vidal, there was a group some time ago, Women in Energy, a dynamic group of women who are leaders in the energy sector. I think it would be worth a while to hear from them too, Chairman. All right, so those are my submissions.
So what I hear from you, member, is that you're recommending 10 to 15 minutes per presentation. Members, I would concur with that and basically put forward 15 minutes as the allotted time, and that will be obviously indicated to them prior. So we're not preventing them from submitting, but in terms of their opportunity to speak on their submission, 15 minutes would be allotted. But obviously, if they have a document that they want to submit, then obviously we can accept that. But they would have to summarize their position. And I think 15 minutes is more than sufficient to have that done.
Mr. Chairman, can I just come in on that point, because the committee has a specific mandate in terms of the business before it, and as I read the extract from the minutes, both in the House and the Senate, it is to review the provisions of the Act. So perhaps that public notice that is sent out to stakeholders can be very careful in its wording, so that we're not in a situation where we're getting presentations on policy matters that do not touch and concern.
Good point, member. And just to indicate, as you mentioned, that we will have to at the next sitting of Parliament move a motion in order for the committee to be able to meet virtually. So we'll ask that be done through leader of government business, and he'll be advised from now in relation to making sure that is done, so that it does not hold up our dates that we're currently setting. Member, I agree with you on that, and I'm sure that the wording of the public notice will be specific in relation to what we have been mandated to do here. The schedule of subsequent meetings in relation to after the 21st and the 28th. Okay, so the suggestion is that we will work with my office to get some proposed dates and have them sent out to the membership in short order, so that you can give a confirmation, or if you have a conflict in relation to those dates. But definitively, we would want to make sure that the committee keeps moving to the point of where we get to the objective, which is the review and, of course, the amendments of the Act, the Electricity Act. And, of course, the sooner for that would be the better. I guess we will be in a better position to know how, after we get the responses in the terms of the scheduling, and of course, that will dictate, obviously, how many meetings we have to have and how we can get through the public inputs, and then get back down to the review of the Act with a view of concluding it in the shortest possible time. That basically takes care of the procedural matters. So we would move on to AOB. Any other business?
Mr. Chair, may I just inquire as to whether we have an opinion from the AGC touching this matter? I think it will take some time for us to digest whatever the AGC has to say in relation to the mandate which has been given to us. Overall, we are going to be reviewing the Act to see whether it is in accord with government's policy. And I would think that we need some input from the AGC, and thereafter it would put us in a better position to, well, and those people who are making their submissions would be guided by whatever the AGC says.
So, as I indicated before, we have the support of the AGC's office through, who are actually watching the proceedings through PBCJ, in terms of any opinion in relation to the Electricity Act and the review. I'm not sure. I'd refer that to the ministry officials to see if you can respond to that.
I'm not too sure what's the question, Chairman. The member
No,
asked for.
whether or not if the AGC has had any input into the Electricity Act and the review.
Well, I suspect you will invite them at this stage to participate and to give their
so they
input.
are participating, but I think the question was twofold, whether or not there was any review of it done in terms of any comments, and whether or not they would be. But they will be a part, and they will be there for us in terms of any questions or any issues that are raised that we need input from them going forward with the committee. So I would take it that we have not gotten any input to this point, as obviously the review committee would just be starting the proceedings today. All right, so on that note, we move to the adjournment. So just to confirm again, the next meeting will be the 21st at 10 a.m. All right, 21st at 2 for the ministry's presentation, and then we will be on the 28th at 10. 28th of April, 10 a.m. Yeah? 28th of April at 10 a.m. So just again, 21st of April at 2 for the presentation by the ministry, and the 28th of April at 10, which is when we will start the presentations. So as I indicated before, today is specifically for procedural matters, and it is now 10:46. So I ask for adjournment until the 21st at 2 p.m., for which you will be notified with the link and the arrangements in terms of that meeting. Thank you very much. Adjourn.